Welcome. So I'm going to be talking about the spiritual heart. If you have watched any of my other videos on the chakras, what I've done is gone through chakras 1 through 7, the crown, so root to crown, as well as the Bindu point. And now I'm going to be going to the spiritual heart, which is really the completion point of the spiritual path of spiritual awakening, um, of whatever terms you'd like to put onto it. I've talked about this in previous videos, but I will remark on two things again. And the first is that some traditions feel as if the breaking through of the crown, so energy flowing through the crown, so above the crown, is the completion point of the path. There are other traditions and experiences, such as, mine that I'm going to share with you, that have the spiritual heart and the heart space as being the end of the spiritual path. There's a lot I could say about this, but in simplicity, I find that paths that have to do with the body and awakening through the body and in the heart space, and paths that have to do more with the mind, or with more with kind of mental spaces, have to do with the achieving kind of non-dual experience through the crown. The other thing that I will mention is that um, when I'm talking about the spiritual heart, in simplicity, we can consider it to be the heart chakra extra. And so what that really means is that when we're going through our chakra system, when our chakras are opening, our heart will open to a certain extent, but it really takes opening the rest of the chakra system through the head and then having energy flow back down again for our heart chakra to open fully. So we can really consider the heart chakra, the spiritual heart, to be the ultimate reality, to be the axis of our entire system, to be kind of the origin of our experience. In terms of chakra perspective, I like to group the first 3 chakras together because they have to do a lot with personal wounding and, kind of childhood stuff and our need to be in competition with one another and our egos telling us to shield ourselves or separate ourselves from one another. And then the upper chakras, throat through crown, are really about us discovering that we are more than a separate self and merging into cosmic consciousness or union. And so the heart is really the axis point. It is the origin point of everything. Really understanding the heart, particularly the spiritual heart as the center of self, would be a good basic understanding to sort of work our way forward from. So other words that we could bring in here that start to be brought in when we're talking about the Bindu point as well are things like truth, simplicity, clarity, those sorts of things. But they have a different flavor than the upper chakras. The sort of truth that we experience in the upper chakras tends to be outer truth, a lot of it. It tends to be, for example, developing psychic capacities to see through other people or to kind of see where they are consciousness-wise, to see their past, their future, that sort of stuff. A lot of stuff you probably won't believe if I'm sharing it, but let's just say having our psychic senses open, being able to experience reality as vibration, as flow, as feeling a part of everything, of oneness, if you watched my Bindu video, dropping into that place of silence, that point or mustard seed, that kind of single point from which creation came out of, going into the voids, going into experiencing essentially creation create itself, which, is quite a mouthful and is something that cannot be fully described, but the silence and the peace that I refer to is the closest that I can manage, as well as describing kind of the light of existence where people may have encountered in popular culture or media a bit, like through near-death experiences, that sort of tunnel or white light that some people experience, or the voids, the concept of that kind of blank white space. Um, the clarity that comes in the heart space is really, in a lot of regards, the clarity of soul. And so we can consider that after the rest of our chakra system that has opened, what happens is that throughout our whole path, if we were talking kind of in simplicity, is that everything that is disconnected within us connects. And so throughout the spiritual path, if you notice the different chakras, is like first chakra, we feel completely and totally alone and abandoned. Second chakra, we grapple with people and our parents, and third chakra, the world. Fourth chakra, we start to come into connection with others, with other people. And so when the top chakras open, when the Bindu point opens, there is energy flow moving downward through the system. And for simplicity, I will say that people will have had downward flow prior to this point, basically after the throat opens. This is a big way of how bliss is created, is the upper stream and the downward stream get together and meet, and we experience bliss, or other absorption states, joy, ecstasy, like quiet, all that sort of stuff. But these centers opening and being able to fully accept energy, divine energy, for us to be fully connected to divinity, flows into our heart space. Basically, our Bindu, our crown, connect with our heart space. They flow downwards. That could be determined to be like kind of the descent of grace, would be an excellent way of describing it. And I will say again that this is a very felt thing. It is something that is felt physically as well as emotionally. It is not a mental construct. It is something that is very much, faith is something that is very much felt in the heart space. The descent of grace is very much felt by people and experienced by people, and even experiencing for it for a moment greatly transforms people's existences. So, in the spiritual heart space, we find ourselves with energy flowing up, energy coming down, that divine flow of energy meeting the heart. And what we discover is that there is still blockage there. The best way that I can describe it is that all of us, or most of us, talking about soulless people walking around is an entirely different video, but all of us have access to our soul. All of us have access to our spiritual heart. But what has happened is that we have been hurt. We have shielded ourselves. We have guarded ourselves. We've created layers and layers of covering, layers and layers of ignorance, lack of awareness in this area. And so the rest of the spiritual path is really the heart releasing these layers and layers of shielding, these layers and layers of lack of awareness or ignorance, until the heart can shine through. And so when those layers and layers start releasing, what somebody will start to notice is that the heart is the center of their being. It is the access point of their being. Pretty much everything else will start to drop away. This is why some spiritual paths, including, kind of Sufi spiritual path is a good example of one, even though I am definitely not a scholar in that path. But understanding and knowing the importance of the heart, and that it is the center of our existence, that it is the place within us that truly matters, um, is recognized by a whole lot of different spiritual paths. But here we really get to experience it. We get to feel it, that experience of everything dropping away and a pulling or a gravitation towards the heart space. I will say that even with everything that people have gone through to this point, there can still be a desire to sort of go back into the mind or go back to other areas of the body, to go back to story, because going into this sort of primordial experience of existence, the sort of baseline layer of our being, if we slough off all of the rest, all that is untrue, all that is illusion, every sort of layer that is keeping us back, that is delusional, filled with illusion, that is untrue, that is conditioning, all of that sort of stuff, if we release that, what we have left is the spiritual heart. And the experience of that is terrifying. And in previous places, a lot of people get freaked out by change because, on a spiritual level, we correlate change with death. Um, so kind of the devil we know sort of thing. And so a lot of people really fear change. First of all, because there's an association on a biological level with death, but also there are parts of them and our children, aspects of themselves and resistance, that are really holding on to doing these unfortunate things, being in a state of resistance, not wanting to move forward because it in some way serves them. For example, if we have an inner child that is 5, that inner child isn't going to want to grow up and, eat their cauliflower and, go to the gym or, whatever the thought is, because they want to be 5. That's kind of a simple example of that. This is a fear on the deepest existential of levels, and that fear is truly understanding who we are and truly having unfettered access to our soul. And so this fear that arises for people can arise simply as feeling a sense of fear when going into the heart space, although that ordinarily is going to be a lot of other things associated with the heart and our children and all that sort of stuff that I mentioned. But at this point, this fear arises because this is kind of the ultimate surrender, if you think about it. Every sort of sense that is untrue, that whole list of things that I said that is illusion, there is fear in releasing that. There is fear of kind of looking behind the curtain, so to speak. There is also enormous fear that comes up vibrationally. And so the person experiencing their spiritual heart will feel a lot of shakiness or vibration. The best way I can describe it and what happened for me when the center was opening was sort of like an internal experience of very effervescent soda. And so kind of when you release the soda, you pour it into the glass, there was like all of these bubbles and sort of shaking and shivers and cold and all of this sort of stuff. Um, because this is the point of ultimate surrender. It is the point of, you know, getting to direct knowledge or gnosis of the soul. And so this is a distinct reorientation because until this point, we are still in some way hanging on to the mind being kind of the ruler of everything. That is our illusion. We still have some sort of sense of illusion of control. Um, Even though to get to this point, we have got let go of our mind trying to figure everything out. There is still sort of a sense of the mind being dominant, and the spiritual heart opening means that the spiritual heart, its knowledge, its wisdom, that direct access to the soul is dominant. And what happens is that a channel forms between the spiritual heart and the mind in which intuition, direct knowledge, direct experience can come forward, and then the mind can figure out what to do with it. So the mind being the servant rather than the master. Um, this is an interesting reorientation, not only because we have all these societal restrictions and all that sort of stuff, but the experience within ourselves of going into a heart-centered place, a loving place, when so much of the world is so individualistic, so broken, so separated, can be an interesting thing to do. The other reason for there being shaking or this sort of effervescent pop sort of thing that I have experienced is that there are still impurities in the system. And so the best way that I can describe this is by saying that when the upper chakras open, the Bindu and the crown, it is about connection. What is preventing your connection to the divine? Um, what is preventing your connection to all that is? On the heart level, when we go back into the body, back into the heart, there is a question of what within you is not love. And so this is a tricky question because a lot of people, as I talked about in my heart chakra video, a lot of people don't understand that you can be an entirely loving person. You can be filled to the brim with love and still tell people no and still do things that they may not like. In that video, I talked about, parents of an addict, that scenario. And that what the addicted child may want and what the parents may offer out of love are going to be two entirely separate things. So the shaking that is experienced in the heart space through the spiritual heart is not only releasing all of the rest of the layers of the heart, what is kind of getting in front of the spiritual heart fully shining, it is also shaking or releasing the rest of the impurities in the body. I will say that for me during this time, and I have not fully worked this out, if I ever do fully work this out, I will post a video on it. But for me, it makes sense in terms of Chinese medicine. And in Chinese medicine, there is a distinct connection between the heart and the small intestine. They're friends, they're channel pairs to each other. But when my spiritual heart started opening, my hara, basically the area of the abdomen, the small intestine, also started activating quite a bit as well. I still cannot put into words exactly that sort of linkage. If I ever do figure it out, I'll let it know. I'll let you know. um, one of the things that I will say is that I wrote a book working with Kundalini. I wrote it in 2017. And in the book, I was very honest about the fact that at that point of time, I had only experienced the opening of the spiritual heart. I forget what it was, like 3, 4 times or something like that. And I found that some people were extraordinarily appreciative of me saying that, you know, I am still working on myself, that I have gotten, a certain period of time, but there are still things that within me that could open up more fully. And there are some people that took that as a reason to criticize or to break down, and that is because we love this image of our gurus and our teachers of being enormously perfected. We love this idea of them being completely and totally, um, you know, um, at the end of at the end of their space, at the end of their line, sort of, sort of thing. And that is kind of what sells. And so I don't want to put a damper on this subject, but I will say that at this point, if you were to find somebody that is willing to express their humanity, their imperfection, um, you will have much better luck awakening than finding somebody that claims perfection or complain, uh, um, you know, um, claims to be completely and totally complete, finished, etc. Because most of those people are just sort of in an interplay. They're at a third chakra level of awareness where they want power over people, um, sort of thing. I realize that that is a total aside. Maybe I will cut this section out. Maybe I'll leave it in. But let's go back to the good stuff. Um, and so I will say that limitations continue to be let go of in this area, and a flowering happens. So I will say that I have experienced this, which is an experience in the heart with a sense of something blooming there. I didn't see anything there like a flower there, like some people visualize in other chakras. Um, I did see an eye there looking out, which has happened with some of my chakras and not others, but very distinctly happened in the heart chakra, signifying the opening and ability to see existence through that chakra. Although this can come up before this time, but the heart is really the place in which we can um, stop doing, stop feeling the need for doing, stop feeling the need for acquiring or acquiring so much. Um, this tends to kind of go into people's mind a bit before this. I mean, honestly, most people in spiritual terms have, heard of minimalism, or maybe we don't need, so much stuff and that sort of stuff, even if they've, not done much spiritual work. Um, but here, there can be really a sinking into that. And the best way that I could describe it nowadays is that people tend to take this sort of thing to extremes. And so if you are content and happy living without anything, being able to put everything into a backpack and leave, that is wonderful. If that is your bliss, if that is your path, if that is what makes you feel comfortable and all of that, that is completely right for you. However, when you get to when the crown and, kind of the Bindu have been broken through and go into the heart, you start to recognize that a lot of rules, a lot of thoughts that people have about spiritual stuff really doesn't matter. If somebody has $2 to their name, if somebody has $2 billion to their name, on some level, that matters quite a bit in terms of finding your next meal and all of that sort of practical real world stuff. On a spiritual level, after breaking through kind of the Bindu point, going into the spiritual heart, it really doesn't matter. Somebody can be spiritual with nothing to their name. Somebody can be spiritual with everything to their name. There is a question of power and that sort of stuff. But let's kind of stick with that simplicity. Same sort of thing for where you live, where you are. Of course, I think certain, places are extraordinarily beautiful. I went on a vacation last year to the coast of Oregon, and it was one of the most beautiful places. I've traveled a decent amount. It's one of the most beautiful places I've seen on Earth. I was able to recognize that and feel that and appreciate that. But at this level, there can be an understanding that yes, things are beautiful, but there is that inner light, that inner divinity where it doesn't really make a whole lot of difference. You can be, not to pick on Ohio, but you could be in the middle of Ohio, or you can be at the coast of Oregon, and you can still experience that same sensation of freedom and bliss and heart-centeredness and all that sort of good stuff. So a lot of that sort of stuff just sort of drops away and releases. And a lot of times we don't recognize how many beliefs or understandings we've sort of taken on until we start to sort of drop the remaining chains. What is preventing us from truly releasing all the remaining limitations we have and experiencing freedom. And one of these things is recognizing that we do need to make a lot of effort on the spiritual path. That people don't get to this point without having a lot of effort on the spiritual path, but that even effort itself can be dropped, can be released. We have such a doing culture and really dropping into being, really feeling being, like I said in one of the other videos, really recognizing that you are worthy, you are lovable, you can experience all of the absorption states, ultimate reality, whatever spiritual concept you want to put in there. And at some point, trying is absolutely necessary, and at another point, trying just screws you up. I know this because I kept on trying to meditate and do rituals and stuff like that, far past the time in which they were helpful for me. And so just a thought that I am bringing out there. So in Ramana Maharshi's method of working with kind of the chakras, talking about awakening, he would talk about the spiritual heart, and he would specifically talk about nodes around the spiritual heart. And some of those nodes were associated with joy, with play, with different experiences of reality, some in terms of depression and stuff like that. Also ecstasy. But he specifically talked about the spiritual heart as being on the right side of the heart. So like kind of one finger breath from the center. And his thought was that the spiritual heart was this tiny pin drop place, similar to the tiny mustard seed I talked about with the Bindu point, this tiny spot. So a Bindu right side of the chest, this spot that would pull you in. And when you would go into that spot, you would experience essentially the godly atom of self. And so a lot of different people talk about this in different ways. For example, Meister Eckhart said, God is born in the heart, heart is born in God. And we get to also modern day concepts of, you are a god, you are divinity, you are a goddess sort of things. And I will say that, in previous levels, there is a lot of misunderstanding about that, and an attempt to sort of reclaim power in a way that comes from trauma or wounding. I will say that I have not experienced that. I have not experienced that yet, that particular place that he's talked about. What I have experienced is the shaking, the opening, the sense of this spiritual heart opening more and more, the connection to the soul, the recognition of the ultimate reality, the true reality coming from the heart, and a sense of everything dropping away except for the heart space in my life, reorienting around the heart rather than the energy center of the head. I've also felt that sense of blossoming and shaking and, all of that sort of stuff. Um, and so I have no reason to doubt Ramana Maharshi, of course. Um, I will also say that in that method, I'm a householder and, I have a practice and chat with people and, I'm a spiritual teacher and practitioner and stuff like that. And so I'm not able to spend my days in absorption to get to that point. So things can kind of progress a little bit more slowly for me. What I can offer you from direct experience is knowing that the spiritual heart is definitely there, that it is a state of stillness. In Chinese medicine, there's this lovely imagery of the heart, the spirit, the soul being at a good place, being like essentially like a calm or quiet pond that I've always loved. Um, and the real question that guides my life these days is understanding this background, feeling this true nature of the soul, this true connection of the soul, and being in a place of witnessing what parts of myself still separate, what parts of myself cannot be in a state of love, what parts of myself kind of separate from this massive heart flow, from this massive heart vibration, from this pulsation. Um, and so that is a question for myself as I am working through this and at the end of 2024. Um, and so I hope that you have enjoyed all of these videos and that they have served you well. It's been wonderful to do a project that has been so freewheeling, and I do hope that all of you have found something that has been of help and support for you while watching this or any of my other videos.